Welcome to Scope Creep, the show that shines a light on what it's actually like to build a business, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm Jamie Cox.
And I'm Liz Talego, and we're both entrepreneurs in the business of building businesses. Every other week, we'll dissect the myths behind being a solopreneur, call out the celebrity entrepreneurs who push the passive income dream, and talk about the real benefits of being your own boss, from choosing how and when you spend your free time to building a career where you call the shots.
Let's take a #unfiltered look behind the proverbial curtain and learn how to build a values-based business where you're healthy and wealthy. No manifestation or vision boards required.
Welcome to episode 7 of Scope Creep. Today we're talking about how to have tough conversations with clients and the 3 most common client management problems we consistently face. To add a little flavor to the conversation, we're opening up the Scope Creep email vault and reading some client emails, sensitive info redacted of course, and sharing how we responded to them. So if you've ever had a client that's made you want to change your email address or go into hiding, then listen up. Today, we'll tell you exactly how to navigate those sticky situations while keeping the client relationship intact.
One note before we get into all of that, we want to make a humble plea to our dear, sweet listeners. If you're loving Scope Creep, if you've ever had an aha moment listening to our voices, or if you've shared the show with someone else, do us a favor and leave us a quick review. We absolutely want to come back into your ears for season 2, and that's a way you can help us get there. All right, Liz, it's happy hour. We're talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. So what was great this week and what was terrible? Let's start with what's great.
Okay, so this is a follow-up from a high and a low, maybe a couple weeks ago, where I talked about how I sent out my very pretty much standard boilerplate contract to a client. Everything was going great. They were a referral from somebody that I know. We get to the contractual state of things, just need to sign that and then we can start working together. And they respond with, actually, no. They saw that I had boundaries and some basic stipulations about how I want to be paid on time and treated with respect. And they backed out of the deal, which was fine because I think, as you and I discussed, it told me everything I knew about what it would be like to work with them.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So fast forward however many weeks or months ago that was, I can't remember. And I'm in the same situation. I'm gearing up to send this exact same contract out again to a new client. Of course, the scope and the project are a little different, but my terms are identical. And I found myself, as I was getting ready to press send, feeling like a little queasy in the stomach because I just had this negative experience where, someone was like, no, thank you, ma'am, after seeing it. And I never feel this way, but I paused for a minute. I was like, hopefully I don't get that same response, which is not a rational feeling. That's more of like an emotional fear because I'd been rejected because of it before, even though I know that my terms are totally legit. And in just a couple hours, I got a quick, everything looks great email. Can you just tweak this one piece, which was just about a deliverable count, which was a misunderstanding on my part. Yeah. And they were just totally happy to sign it. So it just reaffirmed for me that I'm not crazy. My terms are reasonable and people want to work with me.
Yes.
Who understand boundaries and scope creep. And we're going to be kicking things off this week. So I'm excited about that.
Yes. It's not me. It's you.
Yeah. Once again. What about you? What went well this week for you?
Well, I've had an exciting few weeks. I joined 2 different cohorts. That are professional organizations for different types of people. The first is called Badassery. Shout out. Love their name. And it is for creative people and quote unquote thought leaders who are interested in doing more of the public speaking workshop sort of thing. So I joined that. I was accepted into that a few weeks ago, and I'm already really, really enjoying the people in there and just gaining so much from it. So that's been a really nice thing. And then I've also joined another network called Pollen, which is a network for freelancers. So I've joined that as a mentor and just kind of sharing my insight into freelancing like we do on this podcast. And it's just been so great to connect with other freelance people who are either just starting out or who have been in this game for, tens, if not 20s of years. And it's just been really enlightening. And, we talk about how isolation is kind of the enemy in this work. And that is very, very true. And I'm seeing kind of the other side of that right now, that like, oh, I have this great community of people that I can plug
Mhm.
into, ask questions, like no question is kind of too dumb. And it's just been really nice. So that's been a great high for me this week. What about the
Amazing.
lows?
Um, Nothing too low. I have a
That's
low
always
that
good.
actually I think fits really well within the context of the conversation we're going to have today about tough client communications, because I think I might need to let one of my clients go.
Ooh.
I haven't it's nothing personal. I haven't fully made the decision yet. It is simply a matter of resources. And there's only so many hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really fortunate to be in a position right now where I have, plenty of work. I have some long-term work. I have some like nice little infusions of short-term project-based work. And I have a client whose needs haven't for a while been the best fit for kind of my production schedule. And it's like I said, it's nothing personal. It's nothing they've said or done. I'm just kind of in that reevaluation place where I'm thinking ahead towards the fall. I'm booking business through the end of the summer and thinking, okay, can I continue to deliver on all fronts in the way that I want to, given that this one particular client's needs are very intensive, and
Yeah.
sometimes our ways of working are not, nobody's doing it the wrong way, they're just not complementary. So it's never an easy conversation, and I haven't had to do it a lot, but there are fair and thoughtful ways of doing that. Of course, giving lots of notice and having a conversation, not just sending an email, things
Yeah.
like that. So, but you never look forward unless the client is a train wreck. You never look forward to parting ways with someone that you otherwise respect and have enjoyed working with. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Um, I haven't had a ton of lows lately either. I feel like I've been in this very good season of life right now, but we were just talking before we started recording that I was traveling last week, and it was just kind of a quick trip, and just not sleeping in your bed and like not working at your desk, all of those little things just throw me off so much.
Yeah.
So I'm back at my desk on Monday after we got back, and I'm just feeling the like stress of, oh, I didn't get everything done that I wanted to last week. I have a bunch of meetings this week. Am I going to get it done this week? So anyway, that's a common theme in my low, is just like the overwhelm and anxiety that I get when I look at my to-do list. So, if anybody else feels that way, no, you are not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've been talking for months now about what a weird year this has been. Lead flow has been not the same as it has in years past,
Yeah.
and it's been real feast or famine in the freelance world. I know that from a lot of different service-based business providers, consultants that I speak with. So I think we're all feeling a little bit of that whiplash in different ways.
Yes, yes. Well, and it's interesting too. I feel like because of that feast or famine, I have like raised my expectation for, oh, I need to turn this around. I need to get these agreements signed, like all of those things. Even though I've said this before, like I'm the only one putting that deadline on
Yeah.
myself. And it's just kind of this like mind game that I'm playing of like, if I don't send it, I might not get the job. And that's not true. That's not likely.
Well,
So yeah,
I will say though, just to push back on that a little bit, I think people have been afraid to spend their
yeah,
marketing budgets.
yeah,
And if they have now gotten to a point where they're finally ready to stop white knuckling those budgets and they're ready to execute, they're like ready today.
yes,
You know what I'm saying?
yes,
So I
yeah.
think, just to reflect back a little bit, like, yes, is your business going to come to a screeching halt if you don't have that turned around in 24 hours? Probably not. But I do think that the market is demanding a sense of urgency right now that we have
Yeah.
not seen before.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. We
No, it's okay.
do
I
not
can do
have
this
any
part.
sort of transition, do we?
No.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, we do. I'll read
yeah, we
it.
do. Okay.
I'll read
Okay,
it
cool.
now. Okay. All right. So, looking ahead to today's conversation about hard conversations with clients. Before we dive into the nitty gritty of this, I want everybody to stop for a second and think about the last tough situation that you had with a client. If you're still a corporate girly, maybe you had, a tough situation with a manager, with a direct report, or just a colleague. And I want you guys to think about the emotions that came up for you when that situation reared its head, and think about what made it so hard? Were you afraid to approach the person? Did you feel like your boundaries were being violated? Maybe you were just plain confused. Either way, think about what was your biggest worry? What were you most afraid of? Were you more afraid of losing business, or were you more afraid of not being liked?
So to kick things off, I have a great client email. It's, we said it before, it's changed for privacy, but this is kind of the basis of these emails. It is the scope creep email. So we've all had those we've all had those clients that want a little bit more, whether that's more rounds of revisions, a ton of meetings, or like total scope change. We've all had them. We know them. We don't love them. So I'm going to read an email about a project that has already gone months past the deadline, which, by the way, seemed urgent when we started, of course. There's been extensive rounds of revisions. Shame on me for letting them go on this long. And now the client is looking for even more changes because of an internal error on their part. So here is this lovely email. Hi, Jamie. The team has hit an unexpected delay/request this week. The good news, the project is currently with our board chair, so we are making progress. The bad news, our chair mentioned that our bylaws state that all printed documents need to be approved by the entire board. Just an aside. Wow. Yikes. With that in mind, we will have 2 to 3 more sets of revisions of this report before it goes to the rest of the board for review. Following that, the board will likely have additional revisions that will need to be implemented. This was news to us, and we understand that this changes some things about our final delivery date. I know we're way over the initial timeline in our contract, and this will exceed our scope of work for the I know we're way over the initial timeline in our contract, and this will exceed our scope of work for the edit rounds. But we appreciate you hanging in there with us and getting this done. Thanks so much for understanding. So, Liz, a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
I just want to know, how would you respond?
Is this person well? Do we need a wellness check? Maybe we have to ask that first, because what just blows my mind about this, and I've had similar client communications in my career as well. They are literally calling themselves out. They are saying, we are way over our initial timeline. We are way deep into the bowels of scope creep territory. Thanks for understanding. But without saying, okay, we're acknowledging this happens, which in and of itself, shit happens. You have to rescope sometimes. That's fine. Yeah. Name it, move on, keep it moving. But there's no invitation within this for you to have a discussion about what this means for new timelines for compensation. Right. And so that's what's really throwing me. I'm really curious about this client's mindset, if it's just a lack of understanding about how these contracts work. But I'm not inclined to buy that, because in their communication, they're saying, like, we know we're screwing this up. We know we're screwing this up. Yeah. And we just want you to fix it. And we just want you to come along for this ride completely blindfolded about what's next. So I would probably need to take a minute, maybe walk around the block, probably not respond right away, especially because I know in this situation, you guys were already beyond the deadline. Yeah. I think I would map out my terms. If there was anything in the initial contract about project restart fees, about kill fees, about, these timelines and the dollar amount associated with those changes, and then come up with kind of a new, maybe hell no manifesto for this specific project around what I will and won't do. And then I want to get on the phone with them and really say, okay, thank you for calling out that this is a big change and being really understanding of that. I want to make sure we're on the same page. This is what it will cost if this happens. And this is what I can provide, and this is what I won't provide. I know that's kind of vague because I don't know the details here, but man, how did you handle this one? With hindsight, it's easy for me to say this, sure, this isn't my client. I'm not in it. I don't have these sunk costs of being involved in the project. I can pop off and say what I would do, but how did you really handle it?
Yeah. Well, I just want to jump into and say, sometimes I feel like people acknowledge that they're wrong as like they expect that to make everything okay. Just the
True.
admission of guilt to be like, and now it's all good.
Yeah,
Y'all,
I'm
that is not
sorry
the
about that
case.
dirt I'm kicking in your face. Like,
Right.
sorry.
So, and just like before we go any further too, this client was great. They were super understanding. And I think when they said these things at the end, I think they just kind of like, how can I make this? What is the band-aid to make this blow a little bit nicer? So
Mhm.
anyway, this, and I said it before too, like shame on me for letting this project get to the point where it felt like, oh, we can do potentially like 6 more rounds of revisions. LOL. Like that was
Yikes.
my bad for, I kind of let these like little revisions go past and then it just kind of accumulated because, you know, it's like when somebody's like, can you just change this one word? And it's like, ugh, I don't want to count that as your entire set of revisions that I outlined. Like that it just seems silly to me. But anyway, it went over. That's my bad. But how I did handle this, I knew this email was coming. I just had a feeling, like a premonition, if you will, that this project had gone on too long. I hadn't heard from them in a few weeks. And then I got this email. And I kind of already knew in the back of my mind when I got this email what I would do. So I did not follow my own rules, which is if I don't feel good about something, I wait like 24 hours to respond.
You're so good.
And well, I didn't follow that rule this time. I mean, shame on me across the board on this one, but
Yeah.
I did respond within probably 30 minutes or an hour and just, I gave it a little bit of thought on how I wanted to handle it. But I basically responded and said, hey, thanks for the heads up. You have 2 options. Like you're right. This did go over scope. This is what we kind of need. This is kind of what we agreed to initially. To move forward, I'm going to charge you, and I said this, $500 per round of revisions. And that's, to be clear, that's like what was built into the scope to begin with. But when you see that number on paper on its own, tied to like rounds of revisions, I think it's like, whoa, so much money. But anyway, so I said, you can either pay me per round of revisions. That will hopefully keep the rounds of revisions down too.
Yeah.
Or you can pay me the final invoice. I can package this file up, send it to you, and you can make the revisions. And they were like, okay, let us think about it. And it wasn't like, they weren't upset about it or anything. It was like, yeah, they weren't like, oh my God. I mean, granted, I didn't get on the phone with them, which I do like that idea. I feel like I'm great on the phone with people too, but
You are, obviously.
but they were like, okay, let us get back to you. We need to make sure that our team can actually handle the revisions if we do take them in house. So yeah, I waited and waited, and I think again they ghosted me.
Oh my
but
God.
I think about 2 weeks later, I had followed up a few times, and they decided to take it in house. And you know what? I was completely fine with that because I was over it. You know,
bet.
like I would rather hand it off than make $500 per round of revision. Like that's just not worth my sanity. So yeah, that's how I handled it. And you know what? No sweat. And I think the weird thing for me is I would still work with them again. Like I said, they were a great client. And I think, I mean, I've worked for companies that have boards and oversight and all of this stuff, and it does get complicated. We've talked about this. There's lots of red tape, and you have to give them some grace. But now I know, okay, this is what I need to do in the future to maintain this relationship.
Right.
Like I would probably bump up the initial rounds of revisions and increase my cost. And just be really clear with them, like, hey, this is what I'm constituting as a round of revision this time around. So please, rather than sending me one change at a time, please ask everybody in your office, gather all the revisions, and then send them to me. So it's worth my time to get into the document.
Yes. And you have to frame that as supportive to the client.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it is. It's not just a nice to have for you. I think this is a great example of one of those situations. When you hear the term board approval, usually you're dipping your toe probably into nonprofit territory. And I think you've really illustrated a common challenge of like, these are great, lovely people. we would probably have fun if we hung out together. Like we
Oh yeah.
like them. We like them. But that does not mean that you have to put up with their broken internal systems. It is
Right.
not your fault, and you don't need to bend your business policies to accommodate exhaustive or unclear rounds of revisions because, you know, their side of the house is in chaos. Um,
Yes.
and I know that can be really tempting to do when you like the person and you want to work with them and they're otherwise great, but that does not excuse the fact that they couldn't communicate with you about where they were and what they needed and how this might have extended well past the deadline.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's also hard for me as like a super type A person who like thrives on process and
I know.
organization to not feel called to like fix whatever internal system they have going on that is like messing them up. I work with a few clients like that where I'm like, oh, this process is just painful. But I have to remember, like, not my job,
I know.
not my contract. That's not the scope. Even though it would make my life easier in the long run, it's not my job.
Right. And it sucks to inherit dysfunction that ultimately makes it harder for you to do your best work, but we can't fix it all and we have to stay in our
Yes.
lanes. I think there's a difference between being a really client forward consultant and trying to support them in the best way possible. That's what we're here to do. And offering advice if they ask for it or offering feedback if they ask for it, but not going in and diagnosing each one of their business challenges and trying to fix things that are outside the scope.
Yes. As much as I
Yeah,
would love to, I
I
just
know.
can't.
I know. Same, same. Ask us how we know. So we said we're going to be going through like the three ringers, three things that we seem to run into most in terms of client challenges. Even if they don't happen all the time, these feel like some of the most prevalent, right? And
Mhm.
so you had a great example of scope creep. It's the name of the show. If you're in business, you're going to rub up against it. Congratulations. But is it cool if we get into the second one?
Oh my gosh. Yes,
Okay.
I'm excited about this one
So the
because,
second
ooh.
one, I know. So, founders, leaders, you brilliant, ambitious people, I freaking love you. But sometimes when you bring a dream to life, when you create something that you feel really strongly connected to, your business is your baby. And it can make you very covetous and rigid around change. And I call this problem when clients won't let go of a bad idea. Maybe this resonates. Maybe it's because this is the way that, it's always been done. This is the way we started and it feels personal because like I said, the business is like your baby and it's hard to let go. And sometimes as a consultant, as a strategist, my job is to put you and your business first and to tell you things that might be hard to hear, to drop some truth bombs, if you will, about maybe how the market has changed and to offer some advice that might feel like a pivot or might feel uncomfortable at first. So let that sink in for a moment. I'm sure most of you can relate. I know that I can even personally relate myself. My business often feels like something that I would really have a hard time turning the keys over to somebody else for. So this happens, not all the time, but I've seen it a bunch in my career. So I'm going to share an email. And again, sensitive and identifying info has been redacted, but this is from a VP who approached me about their brand's messaging and content strategy. Their growth had really tanked and stagnated, and they were in a situation where they were nervous because a competitor was snapping up a bunch of their existing clientele. And up until this point, their founder had been doing all of their content creation, social media, and was really the only face of the brand. And this VP knew this was part of the problem because founders busy and they are not marketers. And so their digital footprint was pretty inconsistent at best. And since this was, of course, in my area of expertise was in the mental health and technology space. So a lot of their content was really overly clinical, hard to understand. And some stuff I will even say was not super inclusive. So this VP asked me for help because they knew they were taking on water. So that's kind of the lay of the land. And here's how it goes. Hi, Liz. Thanks so much for your presentation on messaging guidelines earlier this week. You made some really good points about our positioning, and it was really helpful to see how our competition's messaging had evolved since we first started. The CMO and I are definitely on board for evolving our tone, and we think the shifts you mentioned would really help us connect with our audience and build trust in the marketplace. That said, the owner and I had a chat this Monday, and she's really hesitant to change what she views as foundational elements of our tone and messaging approach. She worries that too many changes would alienate the existing audience, and I can see her point. We know we have some work to do to build internal consensus on the best approach moving forward. But in the meantime, we'd still like to find a way to work together. Could we move forward with a retainer as discussed and focus more on content writing in our existing tone? We're thinking maybe one blog a month or something like that. Let us know what you think. Thanks. Thoughts, Jamie?
This one's tricky.
I know.
Well, so I would definitely go by my cardinal rule first and not respond right away.
Okay.
24 hours at least. But I would likely propose a phone call with this person first and foremost. Like, send them a quick note and say like, hey, totally hear you. I would love to get on a call with everybody that's mentioned. You, the CMO, and the founder or the owner, whatever you want to call them. And basically just talk through, let me hear what they're saying directly, because this is turning into a game of telephone, first of all. Like, one person said this, it's all hearsay. So I love to hear this directly from the owner and hear what they're saying, and then answer questions that are coming up in that moment. Because I think that will give them some sort of clarity around those like things that they're rubbing against. When they hear it, like sometimes when you hear it multiple times from like an outside perspective, it just changes your mind a little bit. So I think that would be my first approach. And then secondly, to the, could we continue to work together without this foundational work? Which is the big ask here. I would, following that phone call, I would likely send a follow-up email and just say like, hey, this work that we're doing is really essential in order to write blogs once a month or however many times you want to do it. And I can't do that work without this. Like, it goes back to that idea of like, if it breaks my process, it's a hell no for me. Yeah. And so I would just lay the land and basically said, hey, I can't move forward with this. I'm happy to finish our work together and refer you to somebody who can, or I'm happy to finish our work together and then we can talk about a future scope. So yeah, this is a doozy. How did you respond?
So in situations like this one, you're right. It's tough to feel like you're in a game of telephone. But what I try to do is look for kind of internal champions. In this situation, I had kind of gotten the impression that this VP and this CMO, they were both totally on board. They got it because this is in their wheelhouse, right? Right. And it was the founder who was pulling things back. And I try to avoid getting triangulated in those situations. I had been paid and I had done this upfront strategy work. I had done a live workshop with their whole executive team about this new approach. And it was so clear to me on that call exactly what ended up playing out in this email, because the rest of the C-suite was very much like, thumbs up, right on. Good God, we've been waiting for this. We need this. Very, very much so. And the founder, I could tell, wasn't super comfortable with change. And in that situation, it is not my job to do anything other than make the best impression and business case for the services that I'm pitching, answer questions, be flexible, be patient and kind. But if somebody is really going to dig their heels in and be resistant, I'm not going to spend energy on that.
Yeah.
So I looked at it as, okay, I'm going to solidify the buy-in from the other stakeholders that I have. I'm going to get on a call with them, which is what I did, and say, hey, I just want to understand the ask here. And also the founder was one of those that was very high touch for 5 minutes and then disappeared for 6 weeks. Kind of like all of a sudden
only cares when they care.
Care when they care, suck all the oxygen out of the room and then leave.
Yeah.
And I know they're busy. And I, like I said at the beginning of this, like I understand that this feels personal, it's hard. So I have some empathy, but I wasn't going to do battle in this situation. And so I got on the phone with those other two people and I could, I think they were trying to be, political a little bit. And I understand that as well. And not say what was abundantly obvious, which was we have buy-in. We know that the business is bleeding out and we need a change. And but our hands are tied. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, thanks for clarifying. And I said essentially what you did as well. I can't move forward with a content creation deal if we don't have this other work in place because I'm just going to continue to make your problem worse for you. Not that the content that I create is going to be awful, but if I don't have the stamp of approval to create content that is more inclusive, that is less clinical, that is, branded in this different way that we've all agreed, except for the founder, is going to be much more appealing to your target audience. You're just asking me to do more of the same of a thing that is not working for you and is not converting and is not solving your problems. And I don't want that for you. And I also don't want that for me. That's not the type of work I want to do. So we ended up just not working together. And it was not anything contentious. It was just, we're not a fit at this time. We'll call you, at some point if we need you. And that call hasn't come yet, but I have been in situations in this one before where things get to a lower bottom and then it's, oh my God, we need you right away, and I may or may not have the bandwidth at that time, but it just, one of the reasons I love being an independent worker is I don't have to get caught up in the politics of leadership teams and what happens when they're not aligned on what's best for their business. I can come in and support them when they make those decisions. I can help them make those decisions, but I don't like to step into that mess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear how differently we would solve that, but still the same kind of bottom line is no, we can't move forward. And I think that kind of goes back to the boundaries conversation. Like, your boundary is, I don't want to get in those conversations that are like obviously internal things that need to be sorted.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm like, oh, I wonder if we can just do a little bit more to make sure this founder feels heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that will let us move forward. So that's kind of how I approach it. But I will say if that call was just kind of like the same thing of them digging their heels in and not wanting to move forward, then it would be like a hard no. It's like that last little chance for me to save it. And I think it's also interesting to hear this. I've had these clients that like the product is broken. It's not the marketing. It's the product. And like you have some internal things you need to sort through. Like you need to get better client feedback, all of those things. So they can kind of improve and they don't. And it does feel just kind of like cyclical of honestly wasting your time and your resources and wasting the client's time and resources. And I try to frame it that way a lot of times when I'm trying to either, alter something or get out of those scenarios is like, hey, I feel like I'm wasting your money. And I'm transparent about that because if it's wasting their money, it's wasting my time. And I don't want that work. So if I lose the work, okay, that's fine. But a lot of times they're like, oh, wow. Like they're just impressed that you can be transparent and be like, oh, wow, I don't feel like I'm doing a good job. You know?
Yeah. It's a gift,
so
really.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think to your point, I think if I'd felt based on the previous communication we'd had that the founder was a little bit more in a workable space. I think I would have included them in that call, but it really felt like the last presentation that I did, just the body language and the facial expressions, it felt like the rest of the leadership had basically told a toddler to eat their vegetables and they were pouting. And so I was like, we just feel like we're too far away. We feel like we're too far away. And I spent a lot of time in my career at other points trying to convince somebody to hire me, and to buy into me and the way that I work and what I sell and what I do. And I've learned over the years that if I have to do that, it's not going to be good. It doesn't mean that I don't have to communicate about ROI and value and like help people understand the impact of what I do and educate clients around that. But I'm not going to drag you kicking and screaming into my world.
Yeah. And it absolutely depends on the relationship that you had previously with the founder. Like, had you even talked to them before? Had they, if they were in calls and they were, you know, giving the vibe that you said that they were, it's like, yeah, that's probably not worth your time to talk about. But if, you know, if you're working directly with these three people the entire time, it's a little bit different to want to include them all versus only want to include two. So I totally hear you on that. It's just like, you got to read the room.
You got to read the room. And if that leadership team goes elsewhere, they're going to remember me because we had great rapport. They totally got it. And so I don't view it as a totally negative thing. I got to meet some people and learn more about them and vice versa. It just wasn't a fit at the time.
Yeah. And I would guess that if they can't get the things through that they feel are important, they're probably not going to be there much longer.
No. And if they can't evolve and they can't, you know, scale effectively, they're not going to have a business. So I'm not saying that I as an individual was going to be their white knight and savior, but just based on what I saw, the total inconsistency and lack of alignment across the board, not good vibes. Does not bode well for their profitability at all. So
well, I have a similar email that I would love to share with you about kind of like the shiny object. So it's kind of like that idea that you hire somebody to do one thing and then you backtrack, or maybe you chase something new. So are you ready for me to dive into this one?
I'm so ready for you.
Okay. So I'm sure you've gotten the urgent, and I mean urgent, email about an urgent project that has to be done right now, or an email about a new idea someone's business coach thinks they should implement to like increase revenue immediately. LOL. This is that email. So say, I know you're not a designer, but say you've been working on redesigning a website for a cleaning company and you're almost across the finish line. Things are looking great. You've got a great user flow built. Things are easy to navigate. It's such an improvement from their last site, and all the conversions are set up, easy to find, chef's kiss, so good. And then you get an email from the CEO who you've worked with on this project. All right. Hi, Jamie. I just saw this website, links to website that is outside of their industry. and I love the way they have a video at the top of their homepage that showcases their entire office space. The video is just so cool and beautiful. It's a lot better than the header we currently have, which just feels boring. Can we make the website pop a bit more with a video like this one? Or I've attached one, attaches low-res iPhone video, we created a few years ago. Would love to use that if you can. Thanks. Liz, how would you respond?
Okay, so my first thought was I would just respond simply no.
Goodbye.
No, goodbye. This is hard because the intentions are pure. The intentions are so pure. This person saw something that resonated with them, that looks cool, and they don't want to be left behind. They want to be competitive and for their website to be just as shiny and slick and engaging. And who doesn't want that?
Right.
But they also have a significant knowledge gap. It's apparent that they really don't know how all this stuff works. The fact that they attached a low-res iPhone video, I'm like, Dad, is that you? You know, like, who is this? You know, that they clearly just don't understand the tech lift and everything involved. So I think this would be really hard because I want to honor this person's intentions. This is not the same as the first one you read where they were like, hey, we're going to screw ya. Cool. This is more like, I just want to be my best self. I want to put my business's best self out there on the internet, and they see you as a person who can help them do that. Right.
Yeah.
But I think this would be a phone call for sure, and just say, hey, I took a look. Thank you for sending me this is what we've done, and remind them of why their website looks the way that it looks, because I know you and I know the way that you work, and I know that that header is there for a reason, that you have a database and creative decision behind that, and reiterate that for them. And then maybe also, this is one of those situations where you could use your no but and
Yeah.
say, we can't do this right now. I hear you that you really like media and you really like video. Maybe there are some other ways we can incorporate this into your, messaging and your marketing strategies. Give them something that feels like a win, but help them feel really confident about the decisions you've made so that their website functions in the way that it needs to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a few flags in this email that I want to call out. So the first is that at the beginning I said, this is a cleaning company. And then they said, they show this video of their entire office space. We have one of those. And so my initial thing that I would tell them, I would definitely get on a phone call with them, but is like, hey, your office space doesn't tell anybody anything about the service you provide.
Right.
And it's like a disconnect with the audience. And when you can kind of point out those flaws in their logic there, it's like, oh yeah, you're totally right. So yeah, it's like finding the little things that you can latch onto and then say, this doesn't make sense here. But, but if you want to start collecting videos of spaces you've cleaned or of, process videos, we can totally find a place for those. It might not be on the header of the website, but let's talk about what that could look like in social strategy, in, other places on the website, YouTube, all of those things. So it's definitely the no, but
Yeah.
it's so important.
Yeah. I'm envisioning like a click to clean where you have like a before and after or something
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, I love that. Cleaning companies, hire us.
Yes, yes. I think that's really well said. And hopefully, you could kind of talk them off a ledge a little bit and get that buy-in back, because clearly they hired you, they trust you for your expertise. But it is hard when there's these constant pivots. And I think you're right. I've heard more than once from a founder, from a leader, where it's somebody in their mastermind, their business coach, their life coach. I can't tell you how many life coaches are out there given the business advice that then people trust and think they have to implement right away. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Where is this coming from? But I think it also speaks to almost, maybe not in every situation, but almost like a level of desperation or fear, like a deep worry that we have to be constantly iterating. We have to constantly be the flashiest, best of the best, when, yeah, you have to stay current, but that's not going to take the place of building a service model or product that's really excellent and easy to sell.
Right. Yeah. And I think to the point of like life coaches and business coaches giving some advice that people feel like they have to implement right away, I get a lot of those emails from clients. And one thing I try to do in that scenario is I don't respond no right away. First of all, I'll like think about it and I'm like, okay, how can I approach this? And I'll dive into a little bit of research, honestly. Like, for example, somebody's like, hey, I think we should call this business whatever it is, whatever name. I go into the trademark database, search that business name, and I'm like, you literally can't because there's a business that exists that's called that. So it's like finding the kind of holes in those arguments, but sometimes too, seeing that and saying, oh, that is a good idea. Yeah. What can we do? And kind of taking that into a yes, and this is how we'll do it. So, yeah, it's really important to, admit when you're wrong.
Totally.
And see opportunities when they do present themselves in that way. So, and somebody commented on one of our TikTok videos recently, and I just wanted to share this because it applies. If this happens and it's out of scope, they were like, I just respond, I would love to scope that out for you. And I'm like,
Ooh,
man, that's good.
Ooh. I mean, so simple, but so just perfect.
I know. I love it. Shout out to I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but shout out to that TikTok user who said that, because this is that opportunity. If they say, hey, we want to include a website on the header, and you're like, that is a good idea. You can say, yeah, let me scope that out for you. So it's not totally you inheriting this load of work. Obviously, there's going to be additional lift there. So it's like, yeah, we can totally do that. This is what it's going to cost. And if they say no, it's like, okay, let's kick it down the road then and maybe revisit in 3 months,
Yeah.
So leaving the door open in any
Yeah.
sort of situation like this.
Yeah. Or I'd love to do some research for you on
Yeah.
how this might impact clicks or conversions compared to what we have right now. And we can decide together if that's going to be the best move for your business. Happy to scope
Yes.
that research for you, something like that.
Yes. Truly making it like a team effort is so important. And I'm like, to all the clients listening, I'm not manipulating, I swear, but it's like kind of convincing people it's their idea too. Like when you can get in a call with somebody and you're like team working a situation, it's like, yeah, isn't this a great idea that we came up with together?
Yep. And really, it's just about making sure that the people involved feel seen and heard.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to feel that way. You want to feel that way. We all want to feel that way. And there are
Yes.
things we can do within our client communications, I think, to support that.
Yeah. Nobody likes a bulldozer.
No. And admittedly, I can be a little dozy.
Same.
I struggle to pause sometimes, and that's something that I always work on. But that's a really nice tie-in to some of the shit you can't skip in terms of problematic client communications. Should I?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this is great.
So to recap, we covered some of our most common client communication challenges today. We talked about scope creep. We'll always talk about scope creep. We talked about not being willing to let go of bad ideas and what happens when your client has shiny object syndrome. If you are in business for yourself and you haven't encountered any of these, rest assured, I'm sure you will at some point. So if you want to know how to prepare yourself for when those tough conversations need to happen, here are some things you can do. So first of all, and this one is just really straightforward, but set email response expectations, whether you do that in a creative way in your actual email signature or just kind of in your working and business policies documentation, or even just in your brain for yourself. Don't feel like you have to respond to challenging emails right away. Take 5, cool off, process. As tempting as it might be to pop off with an immediate and fiery response, we do not recommend that. We do not recommend that. Although Jamie and I will be the first to tell you sometimes it's so freaking tempting. Do not do that. Give yourself some time, give your client some time so that you can have a really thoughtful approach and response so that you can kind of take control back of the conversation and guide it in a way that serves you both. An exercise that you can complete to kind of help your brain start thinking more along the lines of managing these conversations effectively. Take an old email that maybe you responded to a client with and maybe it didn't go as well as you'd hope, but maybe try just for yourself, rewrite that old email with a new perspective. Knowing what you know now, how might you have responded to that situation differently? This podcast today was a chance for Jamie and I to do that with each other and for ourselves. And it has definitely made me realize that I would maybe do some things differently this time around. So try to make the most of those opportunities to learn from past experiences. And also, when you get one of these weird emails, don't be afraid to get a second set of eyes on it. Literally, before we pressed record today, I sent Jamie an email and said, can you look at this? I'm confused. The client is confused. And to be clear, this is a client that we share. And so it makes sense for us both to have eyes on it. But sometimes it's just really helpful to have that outside perspective. We always say isolation is the enemy. And this is one of the reasons why. And if you continue to struggle with this stuff, first of all, know that you're not alone. There is no boilerplate for how to navigate some of this stuff, and humans are messy and weird and will continue to be. So if you're struggling with client communication and you're in a sticky situation, ask yourself, how might your client be viewing this situation? Try to lead with a little empathy. And that's not just a gift you give your client, that's a gift you give yourself. Think about how they might be feeling and try to always assume that positive intent and consider what outcomes they might be looking for. Also, consider what is the worst thing that could happen. If you tell your client no, if you say you'll have to rescope, if you just flat out don't want to work with them anymore and you need to let them know, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen? And then ask yourself, could you live with that outcome? Could I continue to pay my bills if I lose this client? Would I be able to live with myself if I lose this client? And then think about that worst case scenario, but kind of test the waters in your mind. Think about the difference between what's likely, what is the likely thing, and what is possible. How might they respond? And what am I really afraid of here? Am I more afraid of losing business, or am I just really afraid of not being liked? And whatever the answer to those questions might be, those are things to sit with, to chew on, to be curious about. Not a problem to be solved overnight, but just some insight that you can have about yourself, your business, your communication style that'll really help you with these sticky situations moving forward. You can find Jamie at JMER Cox and Liz at LIZTALAGO. If you have a topic you'd love for us to discuss or a question you want answered, you can email us at scopecreepshow@gmail.com. Until next time, stay creepy.